Damon Holloway let out a deep breath, his hand tightening around the edge of his desk. The betrayal ran deeper than any wound he'd suffered in his tours overseas. He replayed the footage in his mind. Adrian's laughter, Benjamin's casual confidence, the easy way they'd moved together, completely comfortable around each other in the sanctuary Damon had built for his family. It was impossible to unsee, impossible to forgive. At least for now. Every room in the house echoed with memories made hollow by deceit. The kitchen where Adrian would sing while she cooked, the den where Liam's childhood drawings still clung to the fridge, all of it tainted by that 30-second clip saved in Damon's secure files, a file he wished he never opened. He resisted the urge to call Adrian right then, to demand answers he already knew she'd try to twist. Instead, Damon stood, paced to the bay window, and gazed out over the manicured lawn, his pride. He saw the pool house at the edge of the property, its shaded deck empty, sunlight playing over the water. It should have felt peaceful, but all he could think about was the truth. Nothing would be the same again. He wondered how much Adrian regretted her choices, if she regretted anything at all. Did Liam understand the depth of what he'd done, covering for his mother against his own father? Was Benjamin lying awake at night, or did he sleep soundly, indifferent to the family he'd helped unravel? A soft knock sounded at his door. Damon stiffened as Liam peeked inside, his face open but wary, unsure if he was welcome. "Dad? Dinner's ready," Liam said, his voice hesitant. Damon looked at his son, 6 feet tall, athletic, with the same blue eyes he'd hoped would carry honesty from one generation to the next. For a moment, neither spoke. "I'll be down in a minute," Damon replied, his voice steady though his heart was heavy. Liam nodded, retreating, leaving Damon alone with his thoughts once again. As silence filled the room, Damon resolved that whatever came next, he wouldn't let this break him. He'd been tested before, by war, by hardship, by loss. This too, he would survive. Only, this time, the battlefield was his own home. He listened closely, noting every inflection in Adrian's voice, every nervous glance Liam cast toward the hallway. Hearing them conspire felt like a punch to the gut, sharper even than seeing the proof of Adrian's secret meetings with Walsh. The way Liam reassured his mother, promising to cover for her, rationalizing their deceit, stung in a way Damon hadn't been prepared for. Adrian's tone was soft and insistent. "We just need to make sure your father doesn't suspect anything. He worries too much." Liam responded quietly, but with a determination that surprised Damon. "He trusts me, Mom. He'll never look in the places I told you about." Damon paused the clip, breathing deeply to steady himself. This was more than a single mistake. This was a deliberate pattern, a careful web spun by the two people he trusted most in the world. Each lie, each reassurance, had cut away more of the foundation Damon had built for his family. He closed the app and set his phone aside, forcing himself to focus. There would be time for confrontation, for truth, but not yet. For now, he had to gather his strength, to plan. He could not allow emotion to rule his next move, not when so much rested on how he chose to respond. Staring at the gathering dusk outside his window, Damon realized just how alone he truly was in his own home. Whatever came next, he would face it with all the resolve and caution his years in the Marines and private security had taught him. He was determined not to let anyone, not even those he loved, blindside him again. He spread paperwork across the dining room table, each document representing another step towards reclaiming his life. Every account closure, every custody request, and every restraining order served as a shield, protection from further betrayal. Damon read through his notes detailing Adrian and Benjamin Walsh's history, ensuring no evidence was left unchecked or unfiled. The silence in the house was different now. Not lonely, but peaceful, like the calm after a violent storm. Damon wasn't sure what the future would hold or how deep the wounds from this ordeal would go, but for the first time in weeks, he felt in control. He had chosen his path and set his terms. He wouldn't allow deceit to define his life any longer. He poured himself a drink, sat back in his chair, and watched the city lights flicker through the large bay windows. St. Louis sounded far away, just a memory from business trips and happier times. But tonight, Atlanta felt like the only place he belonged. If Adrienne and Liam wanted a new life, they would have to fight for it without him. With a deliberate breath, Damon finalized his strategy, ready for the battles ahead. This was a different kind of war, but it was one he would fight with everything he had left. Holloway's actions have been nothing short of punitive. He's frozen my client's accounts, changed the locks on the marital home, and denied Mrs. Holloway access to her son's education funds. This is not the behavior of a reasonable spouse. It's retribution. Damon's attorney, Nelson, rose smoothly. Your Honor, the steps taken by my client are for the protection of his assets and emotional well-being, following the discovery of a long-term extramarital relationship between Mrs. Holloway and a member of their son's school faculty. Furthermore, Mr. Holloway has concerns, supported by substantial evidence, regarding the welfare of his son in Mrs. Holloway's care, given the environment of secrecy and deception uncovered during our investigation. Judge Landry nodded, glancing over the documents submitted. Mrs. Holloway, would you like to respond? Adrienne's voice trembled as she spoke. This is all retaliation. Damon is blowing everything out of proportion. Whatever happened between me and Benjamin Walsh is separate from my ability to parent. He's manipulating the system to punish me in front of our son. Liam's hands clenched in his lap as the lawyers continued their sparring. He looked as though he wanted to say something, but the weight of shame and guilt kept him silent. Judge Landry finally raised her hand for quiet. I am aware of the gravity of the situation. This court is not here to punish either party, but to ensure stability and the best interest of the child. I am granting temporary primary residence to Mr. Holloway, pending a full review of the evidence and recommendations from a court-appointed counselor. Charlotte Brennan bristled, but Damon's face remained calm, an unmovable stone in the current. Adrienne's eyes flashed with anger and disbelief. The hearing ended quickly. Outside the courtroom, Adrienne rounded on Damon. You won't win, Damon. You think you're in control, but you're not the man I married. You never were. Damon met her gaze, unblinking. And you're not the woman I thought you were. We're both learning our lessons, Adrienne. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the undeniable finality of a love turned to dust. I have never threatened them, and I have never been violent. I have, however, installed a comprehensive security system in my home to protect my family and my assets. The evidence you have heard today is proof of the deceit and manipulation that have been occurring under my roof. I have acted to protect my son, and to ensure the truth comes to light. I will not be silenced or intimidated by lies. Judge Landry looked at Adrienne, her expression stern. Mrs. Holloway, these are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence to support your claims of violence and aggression? Adrienne hesitated, her eyes darting between Damon and her attorney. I don't have physical evidence, but I know what I've experienced. He's always been controlling, and now he's using this as an excuse to punish me. Judge Landry turned to Liam. And you, Liam, do you have any evidence or witnesses to support your mother's claims? Liam's gaze dropped to the floor. No, ma'am. I just want things to go back to normal. The judge nodded, her decision clear. Based on the evidence presented, I find Mr. Holloway's actions to be justified under the circumstances. Temporary custody will remain with Mr. Holloway, and Mrs. Holloway will have supervised visitation until further notice. This court will also order a full psychological evaluation for both Mrs. Holloway and Liam to ensure their well-being and to assess the validity of these allegations. Charlotte Brennan stood, her voice sharp. Your Honor, we will be appealing this decision. This is a clear miscarriage of justice. Judge Landry's gaze was unyielding. You may appeal, Ms. Brennan, but until then, my ruling stands. This hearing is adjourned. As the courtroom began to clear, Damon stood tall, his resolve unshaken. He had fought for what was right, and he would continue to do so, no matter the cost. He looked at Liam, who was still seated, his head bowed. "Come on, son. Let's go home. I have evidence of their long-term affair, their planning, and explicit discussions about manipulating outcomes to their advantage. Everything I've done has been in response to the situation they created. If you'd like to review the files, I can make them available for your reporting." Mariana eyed him intently, her fingers poised over her notepad. "A lot of men in your position just try to weather the storm. Why keep pushing so publicly?" Damon's gaze didn't waver. "Because truth matters. Because my name, my company, and my relationship with my son were all threatened by a lie. I won't have my reputation destroyed by someone else's need for control and revenge." Mariana nodded thoughtfully, clearly impressed by his composure. "If what you're saying checks out, you'll have a strong case. But this city loves scandal even more than it loves justice. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Damon gave a small, grim smile. "I've been through tougher battles than this. I'll handle whatever comes my way." Satisfied, Mariana gathered her recorder and notepad. "I'll be in touch, and Mr. Holloway, off the record, good luck. It's about time the truth made the headlines." As she left, Damon felt a rare flicker of hope. Maybe, finally, the world would see the reality behind the stories swirling around his family. He stood and looked out over the Atlanta skyline, ready for the next move in this high-stakes chess game. Allegations of inappropriate conduct and conflicts of interest at the university mounted after Mariana's expose. Parents, faculty, and students demanded an investigation. The administration, under pressure from the public and the press, placed Walsh on indefinite leave pending the outcome. His new position, and any hope of climbing higher, was now in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Adrian's legal team was scrambling to contain the damage. Charlotte Brennan filed motions to exclude the financial evidence, claiming Damon had overstepped by tracing offshore accounts. But the documentation was airtight. The judge allowed the evidence to remain, noting the pattern of deception in Adrian's actions. Liam stayed withdrawn during the hearings, rarely making eye contact with either parent. Damon could see exhaustion and confusion etched on his son's face. The boy, once so certain of his loyalties, now seemed adrift, caught between the lies he helped sustain and the unraveling truth. In private sessions with the court-appointed counselor, Liam admitted to feeling manipulated by both his mother and Benjamin Walsh. He broke down more than once, haunted by guilt for betraying his father and helping foster doubt that had nearly destroyed Damon's life. Damon, for his part, kept his focus sharp. There was no room for sentimentality now. His sights were set on justice. Not vengeance, but a restoration of balance that would allow him, at last, to breathe freely. Each revelation in court was another step toward reclaiming his future, a future he was determined to build on truth, not illusion. They deserve to lose everything. I want them to feel the same desperation they put me through. I want them to know what it's like to have their world crumble around them. Tell them we'll meet, but only to discuss their surrender. No negotiations. Nelson sighed, clearly uncomfortable. As you wish, Damon. I'll set it up. Damon hung up, his resolve hardening. He wasn't just fighting for his dignity and his future. He was fighting for the truth. For the boy Liam had been, before lies and deceit had twisted him into someone unrecognizable. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid reflecting the dim lights of his office. This was a war, and he would see it through to the bitter end. The next morning, Damon woke with a sense of purpose. He dressed in his best suit, the one he wore for battles he knew would be brutal. As he drove to the meeting, he reviewed his strategy, ensuring every detail was in place. He would not be caught off guard again. The conference room at Nelson's office was sterile, the air thick with tension. Adrienne sat across from him, her eyes red-rimmed and her makeup smudged. Benjamin Walsh looked disheveled, his once confident demeanor replaced by a nervous fidgeting. Preston Whitmore, flanked by his attorney, Gregory Miller glared at Damon with barely concealed hatred. "Let's get this over with," Preston growled. "We're here to discuss terms," Nelson began, but Damon cut him off. "There are no terms. You've made your offer. Now, you'll listen to mine. You will sign over all joint assets to me. You will relinquish any claim to the business. You will leave the state and never return. And you will do it all without a single word of complaint." Adrienne's mouth dropped open in shock. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "This is extortion." Damon leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "This is justice. You took everything from me. Now, I'm taking everything from you. You have 1 hour to decide. If you refuse, I'll make sure every detail of your affair, your lies, and your thefts become public knowledge. You'll be ruined, and there won't be a single place left for you to hide." With that, Damon stood and left the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Outside, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decisions. This was the path he had chosen, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. "Holloway's terms," Charlotte Brennan announced quietly, not meeting Damon's eyes. Adrienne didn't speak. Her hands shook as she signed the document surrendering her claim to the business, the home, and any joint assets. Her attorney slid the final agreement across to Damon, along with the pen. Damon signed with a steady hand, each stroke marking the end of an era and the conclusion of a war. Preston sighed heavily, signing where indicated for assets linked to the family trust, his gaze fixed on the table. The once proud patriarch was silent, crushed by the choices of those he trusted most. "Is that everything?" Damon asked, his voice even. Charlotte nodded. "It is, unless you have any last demands." Damon's eyes lingered on Adrienne, but he saw only a stranger. "No, this is enough. We're done here." Outside, spring rain pattered against the sidewalk. Damon stood beneath the awning for a moment, letting the cool air wash over him, clearing away the last remnants of bitterness and pain. He knew this wasn't victory in the classic sense. Too much had been lost for that. But it was clarity, an unflinching look at who he was and what he valued. As he walked away from the building, free at last from the weight of treachery and betrayal, Damon realized that justice, imperfect though it may be, had finally been served. The air was thick with unspoken words as Liam stood at the threshold, uncertainty weighing down his frame. Damon didn't look up from the papers he was sorting, his calm composure providing no hint of the storm beneath the surface. "Dad." Liam's voice wavered. Damon finally glanced his way. "What do you want, Liam?" I didn't know where else to go." Liam's eyes glistened, his shoulders sagging beneath the accumulated regret. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain against the windows. Damon regarded his son, truly looked at him, for the first time in months. "Why are you here?" Damon asked quietly. Liam fumbled with his words. "Mom's a mess. Ven's gone. Grandpa won't talk to us. I made mistakes. I didn't know how to fix them." Damon exhaled slowly. "You made your choices, Liam. They had consequences." "I'm sorry," Liam whispered, his voice cracking. "I wish I could take it all back." Damon studied him. For the first time, beneath the disappointment and hurt, there was an opening, a faint, fragile hope. "Sorry isn't enough," he said softly. "But it's a start. You're going to have to prove you mean it, not just to me, but to yourself." Liam nodded, tears blurring his vision. "I will, Dad. I promise." As Damon watched his son, he felt the hard edges of his resolve begin to soften, just a bit. For all the pain and betrayal, there was still room for healing. Perhaps in time, something new could grow from the ruins. Adrienne had remarried, to a man who seemed more interested in her money than her company, but she appeared content enough in her new life on the opposite coast. Liam had graduated from college, his academic performance marred by the lingering effects of his choices. He had reached out to Damon a few times, but the conversations were stilted and uncomfortable, the bond between them irreparably damaged. Damon had watched from a distance as Liam struggled to find his footing in the world, offering guidance only when asked, and even then, sparingly. He had learned the hard way that love, once betrayed, could not be easily mended. One evening, as Damon sat in his office reviewing contracts, his assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Holloway, there's a visitor here to see you. He says his name is Liam." Damon paused, his heart giving an unexpected lurch. "Send him in." The door opened, and Liam stepped inside, looking older and more confident than the last time Damon had seen him. His eyes, though, held a mix of apprehension and resolve. "Dad," Liam began, his voice steady, "I know I'm not welcome here, but I needed to see you, to tell you something." Damon leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "What is it, Liam?" Liam took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what happened, about the choices I made. I've been talking to a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I chose to believe Mom over you." Damon's expression didn't change, but his eyes never left Liam's face. "And what have you concluded?" Liam looked down for a moment before meeting his father's gaze. "I was scared. Scared of losing Mom. Scared of the truth. I was weak, and I let that weakness guide me. But I see it now. I see how much I hurt you, how much I hurt myself. And I'm sorry, Dad. I'm truly sorry." Damon studied his son, searching for any hint of insincerity. But all he saw was sincerity, a raw and painful honesty. "Sorry isn't enough, Liam. But I believe you mean it." Liam nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I do. And I want to make things right. Not just for you, but for me. I want to be the son you raised me to be." Damon stood, walking around the desk to stand in front of Liam. "It's going to take time, Liam. A lot of time. But I'm willing to try, if you are." Liam's eyes shone with unused tears. "I am, Dad. I really am." As they stood there, the weight of the past finally beginning to lift, Damon felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope. "Holloway, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." Damon frowned slightly, his routine rarely interrupted by unannounced visitors. "Who is it?" "Adrienne Whitmore," Rita replied quietly. "She says she won't leave without speaking to you." Damon took a steadying breath, memories and old wounds threatening to resurface. "Send her in." Adrienne entered, looking older and worn, her confidence faded. She paused just inside the doorway, clutching her bag as though it were armor. For a moment, neither spoke, the air charged with the weight of their history. Finally, Adrienne broke the silence. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I wanted to thank you." Damon raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Thank me? For what?" "For being honest," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "For holding me, and everyone else, accountable when I couldn't do it myself. You were right about everything, and I just couldn't see it. I'm sorry for what I did to you. And to Liam." Damon studied her, his features softening just enough to show he'd listened. "We all make choices, Adrienne, and we live with them." She nodded, her eyes shining with genuine regret. "Liam's doing better," she offered quietly. "We've both learned a lot since everything fell apart. I'm just glad he still has a chance with you." Damon inclined his head, a gesture of respect and acceptance, if not forgiveness. "I hope you find peace, Adrienne." She smiled, bittersweet but sincere. "You too, Damon." With that, she left, her footsteps echoing quietly down the hall. As the door closed, Damon released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The past was behind him at last, its echoes fading. He returned to his desk, steady and unburdened, ready, finally, to live the life he'd fought so hard to reclaim. "Holloway," Trevor said, his voice tense. Damon nodded, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat, Trevor." Trevor hesitated, then sat, perching uneasily on the edge of the chair. He glanced down at his hands, knuckles white from gripping his messenger bag. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," he began. "I know you don't owe me anything." Damon regarded him with a measured calm. "Why are you here, Trevor? What brings you to my office after all these years?" Trevor met Damon's eyes, determination overcoming his nerves. "I wanted to talk about my father." He paused, searching for words. "I know a lot's happened. I read Mariana Velas's article. I know what he did to your family, and to others. But I need to understand what kind of man he really was. My mother never spoke about him, and I feel like there are pieces missing." Damon leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "There are things about your father I wish I'd never discovered, Trevor. He made choices that hurt a lot of people. But if you're here looking for honesty, I owe you that much. What exactly do you want to know?" Trevor swallowed hard. "I want to know everything, good, bad, or ugly. I just want the truth, so I can decide for myself how to move forward." Damon nodded, a trace of empathy softening his features. "That takes courage. Ask your questions, and I'll answer them as best I can." As rain tapped quietly against the office windows, the two men began to talk, one seeking closure, the other offering the unvarnished truth. In that exchange, amid the echoes of past pain and hard lessons, Damon found the satisfaction that comes only from meeting regrets head-on, and finally, laying them to rest. He stood, stretching the tension from his shoulders, and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the darkness within him. Damon knew what he had to do. He picked up his phone and dialed Nelson. "Nelson, it's Damon. I need to see you first thing tomorrow. I have new evidence in the Holloway case, evidence that changes everything." Nelson's voice was sharp with concern. "What kind of evidence?" "Evidence that proves Adrienne and Liam were behind the entire scheme from the start, and evidence that implicates Benjamin Walsh in corporate espionage." There was a pause, then Nelson's voice, steady and professional. "I'll be in my office at 7 a.m. We'll go over everything then." Damon hung up, his mind already racing ahead to the next steps. He would ensure that every piece of evidence was meticulously documented and verified. He would make sure that justice was served, not just for himself, but for the truth. As he turned back to his desk, he felt a strange sense of clarity. The past could not be undone, but it could be confronted. And in confronting it, he could finally move forward, unburdened by the shadows of deceit. He sat down, his resolve hardening. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, a chance to set things right, and he would seize it with the same unyielding determination that had defined his life. He wanted to make sure my mother would be provided for, and Miller convinced him this was the best way. But with Miller's history, everything he did during your divorce, the role he played in helping Ben and Mom, I couldn't stay quiet. Dad, I want to help you stop him before he does more damage. Damon stared at Liam, measuring the sincerity in his son's eyes. He saw no trace of performance or cunning, just worry and a desperate need to do the right thing, perhaps for the first time since everything fell apart. The revelations left Damon's mind spinning with new possibilities and fresh dangers. "You understand how complicated this is, Liam. If Miller has power of attorney, your grandfather's estate could be lost to your mother and to Miller. There's a trail now, proof of his involvement in everything that happened." Damon tapped the folded document, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "I know," Liam replied earnestly, "but I'll testify, Dad. I want to set the record straight about what really happened, about Mom, about Miller and Ben. All of it. I want to help you undo what I helped create." Damon regarded his son with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "You've come a long way, Liam. If you're serious, you'll need to do more than talk. Gathering evidence, building a legal case, this isn't going to be easy." Liam's jaw clenched with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." A heavy yet necessary silence settled over the office. For the first time in years, father and son stood on the same side, united by a single imperative: justice, not just for what had happened, but for whatever future they could carve out of the ruins. "All right then," Damon said quietly. "Let's begin." In that moment, a new chapter started, not one defined by betrayal, but by the glimmer of redemption and the pursuit of truth. The next morning, Damon sat in his office with Calvin, reviewing the documents and recordings Liam had provided. The evidence was damning. Conversations between Miller and Benjamin Walsh, emails detailing their plans to manipulate Adrian, and financial records showing the flow of money between them. Calvin whistled softly as he scrolled through the files. "This is a goldmine, Damon." "If even half of this is true," Miller's finished. Damon nodded, his expression grim. "It's all true. I've verified the voices, the email addresses, the account numbers. Miller was behind everything from the start. He used Walsh to get to Adrian, used Adrian to get to me. When that didn't work, he moved on to Preston's estate." Calvin looked up, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "What's your plan?" Damon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to expose him, but we need to do it in a way that can't be traced back to Liam. If Miller finds out Liam was involved, he'll destroy him." Calvin nodded. "We can use an anonymous tip to the SEC and the FBI. Let them build the case. We'll feed them information as needed, but keep Liam's name out of it." Damon agreed. "And we need to make sure Preston knows what's happening. He deserves to know the truth before he dies. Can you arrange a meeting with him?" Calvin stood, gathering the documents. "I'll set it up. In the meantime, I'll start compiling everything into a report for the authorities. We'll make sure Miller doesn't see this coming." As Calvin left, Damon felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. This was more than just a chance to bring down a man who had wronged him. It was an opportunity to protect what was left of his family, and to ensure that justice was served. He picked up his phone and dialed Nelson. "Nelson, it's Damon. I need you to prepare a restraining order against Gregory Miller, effective immediately. And I need you to make sure Adrian knows what's happening. She deserves to know the truth about the man she's about to marry." Nelson's voice was sharp with concern. "Damon, are you sure about this? Miller is a powerful man with a lot of connections." Damon's voice was cold. "I don't care. He's a manipulator and a liar, and I won't let him get away with it. Not again." As he hung up, Damon felt a strange sense of peace. The past could not be undone, but it could be confronted. And in confronting it, he could finally move forward, unburdened by the shadows of deceit. He stood, looking out over the city, ready to face whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Damon Holloway felt like he was fighting on the right side. Judge Morris listened intently, her gaze never wavering from Miller as Trevor's testimony, and the damning recordings painted a picture of calculated, relentless scheming. The courtroom fell into tense silence as the last audio clip echoed off the walls, leaving no doubt about Miller's role in the years-long betrayal. Nelson turned to the judge. "Your Honor, it's clear these actions go beyond a simple civil dispute. We have proof of conspiracy, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. On behalf of Mr. Whitmore, we request that Mr. Miller's power of attorney be immediately revoked, all transactions he authorized be frozen and reviewed, and the matter referred to law enforcement for further action." Miller's attorney stood, her voice strained. "Your Honor, these are serious allegations, but—" Judge Morris held up a hand, silencing her. "They are serious, and the evidence is more than compelling. Effective immediately, the power of attorney previously granted to Mr. Miller is invalid. All accounts and transactions linked to him will be subject to a court-appointed receiver's review. This court will refer the matter to the district attorney for possible criminal investigation." Preston's eyes glistened with relief, and Adrian wept softly, shoulders shaking in the gallery. Miller, looking much older than his years, bowed his head in defeat. As the hearing ended, Damon exchanged a glance with Liam, one full of hard-won respect, not warmth, but the acknowledgement of justice fought for and finally achieved. Outside the courtroom, as rain began to fall in cold silver sheets, Damon felt the deep, bittersweet satisfaction that comes only when truth has at last prevailed, heavy as it was with the cost of revelation. The story had not brought peace, not truly. Some wounds would never heal. But at long last, the cycle of betrayal had ended, and the future belonged, at least in part, to those who had the courage to stand and face the consequences. Standing at his window, overlooking the city lights, Damon raised a glass to the empty room. The reckoning was complete, the ledger balanced, and if the victory tasted more bitter than sweet, well, that too was fitting. Some prices were worth paying. The quiet stillness was his alone now, earned, measured, and paid for in full. Damon Holloway stood unwavering, fortified by the truths revealed and the justice fought for, knowing that in a world built on shifting alliances and deception, he had at last reclaimed what mattered most, a life defended by unwavering principles and the unyielding resolve to ensure that everyone paid what they owed. Standing alone in the quiet, Damon let the city lights flicker across his reflection, surveying all that had happened. The chapter had closed, the debt settled, and what remained was a hard-earned solitude that carried with it the weight of every lesson learned. The echoes of old betrayals faded into the hum of Atlanta's night, leaving only Damon Holloway and the certainty that, whatever came next, he would meet it with the same resolve and clarity that had carried him this far.